Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. Now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the program. Tonight, my very special guest is Gerry LaGuardia Leonard. Gerry, are you with me?
Yes, I am. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
And
I'm so glad
thank you
you're
so
with
much.
me tonight. Yes. Let's begin this journey, okay?
Okay.
All right. You know, the whole thing is around poetry. So what is poetry?
Well, poetry has been defined by so many people and recorded as such, but to me, poetry is a record-keeping history, and the ancients in India, China, and Persia had always known the importance of poetry as a legacy of their culture and an appreciation of the beauty that could be written in their verses. Myself, I think poetry is in our DNA. It's almost in our cells because we want to communicate. We insist upon communicating.
Yes, I agree.
In this way, well, you know, Mary Oliver writes that poetry is fluid and alive. She even goes so far to say that it's a river and that it lives in the cells.
Oh, wow. Very nice. Well, then, as you think about poetry in terms of what it is, why do you think it's important? And you've already kind of defined it in terms of its importance, but what are some other reasons why poetry is important? Well,
as I think the most important aspect of poetry, and I have to repeat it, is that it is record-keeping for us. It's a way to express emotions, so we can go back and look at poetry from even 100 years ago and find that we're not alone in the world, that there were people that still feel the way that we do, the emotions that we were born with. That's one thing.
Yes. When you think about your work, what are some of the themes of your work?
Well, I would have to say the wonderment. I find the world so beautiful, and I'm always in wonder at I would say nature, certainly, and the environment. Questioning our destiny, our self-fulfillment, our spiritual quest. I believe that my poetry alludes to it in very small ways.
Well, please share a poem for us.
Certainly. Well, I think the first poem, since it's Women's History Month, is a poem that I wrote about sometimes invisible young women, and this is about a young girl. There's so much trouble and strife with our runaway girls. This one is called Girl in the Night, and I visualized it in San Francisco one night when I was sitting at an outdoor cafe, and there was a young girl that should not have been out at 2 a.m. She looked to be about 14. She waits at the outdoor cafe, her porcelain face cast in surreal colors from the strip joints, blinking neon lights, anxiously inhaling a cigarette with red pouting lips, then exhaling gossamer smoke whirling into a translucent halo, falling slowly onto disheveled and dyed black hair. A feeble effort to conceal her identity. She's clearly no longer shocked from the deliberate showcasing of porn in windows or girls posing seductively at curbside on constant alert for prospects in slowing cars, filled with guys her stepfather refers to as freaks, he being the worst freak of all. Later, unnoticed, she slips into the dank, abandoned basement, still homeless and afraid in a city in repose, but clamoring to corrupt the likes of her. So there
wow.
you have some of our young homeless, and we have plenty of them.
That was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. The imagery was just fantastic. You're an incredible writer, Gerry.
I'd like to use...
Incredible writer.
I'm sorry. I write with a lot of imagery versus metaphor. Pretty straightforward and pragmatic.
Yes. Very nice. Now, how does a poem begin for you? With an idea, a form, or an image?
Well, definitely the idea, but the idea has emotions that form around it. It surrounds it, and I'm finding that I have to really feel something emotionally to be able to write about it the way I want to. So I might see a newscast of we've had shootings in Denver, and that prompts this poem as if I have no way to release my anxiety and my inability to help people out other than to write a poem.
Yes, I understand. Now, do you think that someone could be called a poet if they don't feel strong emotions?
Well, I've read poetry by some pretty, and it's good poetry by some pretty bland people, and it's not. They tell stories. I love storytelling.
Yes.
I couldn't speak for other people. I don't think I could, but they must. We're born with emotions.
Yes, we are.
We have feelings and emotions. Yeah. So I think it would probably be impossible for a poet not to write and feel something as they're writing. I think what happens is you get into the skin. You get into the skin of the story.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Nicely stated. Now, what was an early experience where you learned that poetic language had power?
Well, we had to memorize part of Poe's The Raven and stand up and recite it. That was a pretty powerful experience. Afterwards, the teacher asked us all to write a poem. Of course, this was an English class. Well, I thought poetry was all poetry was about death. So I wrote a poem about death, and I could just really feel it. And I was in junior high. So I don't know. Ask me that question again because I'd like to go further with it.
Well, as you think about being
unless you think I've answered it.
No, you've answered it perfectly, but as you think about being in junior high, writing that poem, was it cathartic? Did it release you in some way or shape or form?
Well, it did, but I was a wee bit embarrassed because the other kids were writing about bright things, light, children's stuff. And I was very grown up at 13. I just grew up very quickly, and I think because I had a lot of responsibility.
Okay.
You know, my mother worked, and we had been babysitting since we were very young, my brothers and sisters, and I'm so grateful to her in so
yes,
many
I understand.
ways.
Well,
So now I'm a kid. Pardon?
Share another poem for us. Share another poem.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to share one from my experience of teaching women in jail. And the reason for talking about this during Women's History Month is because when women have committed crimes, when anyone commits a crime, the general consensus of society is we want them put away. We want them put in jail. We don't want to see it or deal with it. And then the women become voiceless and invisible. And we don't want to see them. We want them invisible. So the title of this poem is Finding a New Path. Shackled in disgrace, she waits for the inhospitable iron door to grind open, its harsh clank finalizing her loss of freedom. The room's air is thick with the dank smell of self-prosecution. Women's loud chatter is deafening with discord, reverberating into her boxy barred cell, amplifying her sorrow into a crescendo of regret. Swearing again tearfully when she's released, there will be no more drug friends, no lousy dealers, no hanging out on the streets. She'll stay straight, go to church, get a job, win her kids back. She always makes promises, confused and uncertain about how to keep them. Still, she always promises.
Wow.
So that's just sort of a tip of the iceberg of my experience of teaching in jails for many, many years. And it was a fabulous experience.
Well, what did you learn about yourself?
Well, I learned how strong I was.
Okay.
And we were not, we instructors were not there in a punitive way.
All right.
We were there to be supportive. So I also learned about really caring. And I had yearned throughout my life experiences and the jobs that I had that none of it was as fulfilling, and that I had been searching for that.
Yes.
And I was very fortunate in being able to do that work for a portion of my life. I just feel so blessed. And
well, let's take a brief.
People would say, "How can you teach there?" But
yes. Well, how could you teach there? What did you say? What did you tell them?
Well, the women wanted the same things that we women on the outside wanted.
All right.
They wanted the home, the white picket fence, the children, the family, and they came from a background oftentimes that did not guide them on the right path.
Yes.
And when the repeats, so we have such few programs in jails that what else could you do? You go out, you have you're given car fare money, or maybe someone picks you up, one of your old buddies, and then the cycle starts all over again. So it's just quite fascinating, and it's not like there was a woman who had written a book long ago, and I read it, and she talked down about the women that were incarcerated.
All right.
And I thought it was so pitiful. even though she had murdered someone. Anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say, how many poems do you think that you had an opportunity to write when you worked with the women? Did you write a lot of poetry?
I didn't know, because my entire focus was on the program, what I was teaching.
Okay.
And I was asked to do we had a anger management course, it was called, and it was about a week of anger management. Mm-hmm. And I decided that we needed a additional program of domestic violence. And so I was given permission to go ahead and draw up the material and get it set up, and I did. And so I taught domestic violence also to men and women. Yeah.
Wow.
That was another incredible experience.
Oh, I'm sure it was. Let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back.
Great, thank you.
I'm here with one of my favorite people, Gerry LaGuardia Leonard. The call-in number is 646-787-1631. And, Gerry, we have a caller. They want to talk to you.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. The area code is 720. The first three numbers are 250. You're on the air. Good evening.
Thank you. Hello.
Yes. You're on the air.
Well,
would you like to say anything?
I think you're on the air. No, not yet.
Okay. Well, maybe they're just here to listen. And that's good,
okay.
too. All
sure.
Right. You have a fan, Gerry. You have a fan.
Well, that's great. I need them.
Does writing energize or exhaust you?
Well, you know, I belong to this Denver Poetry Society, and we're given prompts and asked to write about it right away, and they think they're so generous with 3 or 4 minutes to write it. And these people just clip through it, and they come up with some really good poems. And for me, it's difficult for me to do that. I'm a reviser. I will go back and revise poetry over and over again. I'll let it sit. I walk away from it. Sometimes I've over-revised. I'm learning because I haven't been doing this that long.
How long have you been doing it?
Well, I'd say probably about 4 years.
Okay.
My granddaughter put me on. She said, "Grandma, I'm going to set you up a Facebook page." And I just let it sit there for about 4 years. And then I had a poem come to me, a very sweet poem that I didn't set out, but I just love it. And the words just came and it flowed, and I popped it on Facebook. And I had some groups come in and say, we'd like to invite you to our poetry group. And I didn't know what they were talking about. I was so flattered.
Yes. I
was so naive. And that's how I got started.
Well, do you have that poem?
I don't have it out. But
well, please share.
My first love for poetry was haiku.
Okay.
My very first love.
Why was that? Why haiku? Why haiku?
Well, it just popped somehow for me. And maybe I could only handle 3 verses at the time, but I like the idea of playing around with syllables and knowing it was 5, 7, 5. And there were rules to it. It was just fun.
You know, all great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them special or great in your eyes?
Well, I of course, Emily Dickinson, because that was the first poet, and Robert Frost. And I was just blown away when I read Robert Frost's last lines of miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. And I loved the language. I'd grown up with my mother teaching me songs, and I was singing and dancing probably by the age of 3.
Oh, wow, Gerry.
Well, just for company that would come over. I wasn't up on any stage, but I thought I was. You know, I had these dreams, and I'd just pose and do my little 2-step, and I'll be down to get you in a taxi, honey, and I'd just get a stick and pretend it was a cane, and I had an aunt that was very supportive and teach me all these steps, and you know, I had a lot of fun with that.
Sounds like.
But I would say, you know, I love as I went on, and I'm reading Leaves of Grass again by Walt Whitman. So, which is of course, there are wonderful parts of it. But on the other hand, I like some of the modern poets of today. I like Mary Oliver because I was a huge gardener with 3/4 of an acre of flowers and plants and trees.
Wow. That's a lot.
And so she has influenced me a great deal. But I like Charles Bukowski also, even though he's just awful sometimes with his themes. But one of my new influences is David White, who is a philosopher and a poet.
Tell me about David White. Tell me about him.
Well, he's such a beautiful philosopher, and he writes with that philosophical point of view. I think themes that are essential, and he even has a book called Essentials. And he talks about walking into the light. Always he uses walk into the light. And he also writes about an invitation. And he's talking about follow your path. When something comes up, you're being invited. Go to it. Follow the road. Take the curves, even though you can't see what's around the corner. And that's one of the reasons I like him. And I've even taken some seminar courses from him.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Right.
Now, you are, based on everything that I know, a very creative person.
Yes, I am.
What does being creative mean to you?
I mean, I would not, I just can't deny that.
What does it mean to you to be creative?
Well, I used to, you'd be surprised how creative the people incarcerated are. And they, they seemed to need to be able to do that, whether it was writing or they would use gum wrappers and make me little photo frames. And excuse me, and if the women would get a hold of some yarn, they would knit something, and I think that I used to tell them, you know, being creative is as close to God as you can be, because he was a creator.
Yes.
I mean, we think of him as a creator, and they love that. It encouraged them. Anything that was positive.
Now,
you know,
what creative medium would you love to pursue that you've yet to pursue?
Well, I like making books, and there's a wonderful bookmaking company in San Francisco. I have made books, little small ones. I've made origami books with Yoshi paper, and you open them up, and it just flows out like a fan. I'd like to do more of that. There's a wonderful little origami book that will hold, I think about 6 poems also, and then it's folded. And that's something I'd like to get into a little bit more. And, of course, I did the accordion book.
Yes,
because
tell me more about the accordion book.
Well, I felt always that poetry could be presented in a different way, in a different artful way, besides just in a book. And I started writing the poetry, and then I had a person, Audley Hitchens is his name, come in, and he did this beautiful graphic work that my poetry is encased in, and helped me along and encouraged me. And he said to me, have you ever thought of an accordion book? We just talked about bookmaking all the time and the stitching of it. And I said, yes, I know about accordion books because I used to make them as a kid. And so I decided to pull it together, and it's totally self-published from a printer. The hardest part was finding a printer, and I found finally a real genius of a guy who was right in my own family, and he'd been printing since graduating from high school. So he did the printing on the accordion book.
Oh, wow. Now, if a person would like to find more about the accordion book, how could they find it? How can we find it?
Well, I haven't had it on the market, and I was limited in the amount. They're limited editions, and they're numbered. They're an art piece, a collector's piece, and I've always collected books, the most unique I can find. And I have a little accordion book from a woman, but it's only 2 or 3 folds, and that she had pulled together. But they could contact me through my email.
All right. Share another
Which
poem.
I wouldn't mind a bit, you know.
Share another
yes,
poem.
Let's do. Well, I don't want to leave out. I'd like to do a. This is prose. I believe it's more prose than anything. It's called The Subjugation of a Farm, and it's about my grandmother. I really didn't have. I only had one grandmother, and I didn't see her much, so I don't know what it's really like to have a grandmother, but I just loved her. The old neglected farm languishes, distraught by overgrown weeds. I kneel to inhale the sweaty defeats and triumphs seeping from the dank humus, reminding me of bygone green fields. I see the revered tattered barn shading my grandmother's silhouette, her silver braid a shiny halo, as she bends bunching onions, singing, I'm a lonely little onion in a petunia patch. While white hens cluck along in discord and gaily flap their red combs, unaware of the impending high-rise condos and consequent contraction of space. Someday over wine, I expect I'll ruefully reminisce this pastoral era and how inevitable change contorts lives. So she had the farm, and of course, she had no running water, no toilet, well water, and then it was sold because condos were going up. So I went back to visit, and I remember being a gardener, picking up the dirt and running it through my hands as they were building the condos.
Share another poem. I want to hear another poem.
All right. I'd like to read War Games, and this is, I also taught some gender culturation to men because they'd certainly have had their share of it also, not only women. It's called War Games. Infused with patriotism, he enthusiastically enlisted, exuberant in faith, and vivid recollections of his boyhood, heroically toting a toy rifle detailed in a backyard battlefield, playing with hubris bravado, a game that could never prepare him for the stark brutality of this war, where chilling fear marches along every step, and the overwhelming sounds of war and death alternate with visions of his loved ones, the useless toll of suffering, and the loss of too many lives, exacting fresh perspectives as to the relevance and morality about the horrific game of war. So oftentimes I have a wonderful poem that's very short that goes along with this men and gun relationship. May I read it?
Yes, of course you can.
Okay, and this is by Judson Jerome. Because the warden, it's called Deer Hunt. Because the warden is a cousin, my mountain friends hunt in summer when the deer cherish each rattler-ridden spring. And I have waited hours by a pool in fear that manhood would require I shoot, or that the steady drip of the hill would dull my ear to a snake whispering near the log I sat upon, and listen to the yelping cheer of dogs and men resounding ridge to ridge. I flinched at every lonely rifle crack, my knuckles whitening where I gripped the edge of age and clung like retching, sinking back, then gripping once again the monstrous gun, since I, to be a man, had taken one.
You know,
so
your voice is very crisp, very distinctive. What do you think is the relationship between your speaking voice and your written voice?
I think my speaking voice is much better. I love telling stories.
Okay.
Well, I love telling stories, and I like to. They're also a chronicle. I think women are storytellers. We are the storytellers of the world. We are the ones that will pass these stories down to our generations, and I hope that my grandchildren will pick up some of this, and they are on the they do all their communication with this the gadgets instead of using their voice.
Yes.
I have three grandchildren in California who are so typical Irish. They are these storytellers, and they're hilarious, and they're good at it, and it comes so naturally to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm depending on these grandchildren to pass these stories down. I just think it's important, and for many reasons.
You know, when you think about a poem, what do you think are some of the ingredients that go into making a good poem?
Well, I don't think I'd have trouble answering that. I think you have to have a lot of empathy.
Okay.
And heart. And that's such a broad word to even use. Yes. I think you have to, I myself have to have it totally quiet, and I get into character. I really think you need to get into character in order to write a poem.
Well, flesh that out for me. What do you mean get into character?
Well, if I'm writing about the women, the girl on the street, the girl in the night, I become her.
Yes.
I remember being a teenager. I never wanted to run away from home. But I can feel what she feels. That's the empathy part.
Yes.
And also be fearful for her. That's the nourishing part.
Do you think that you were meant to be a poet?
Well, gosh.
You want to answer after a break?
I have a lot of different hats. I'm so excited about life. I have acted in plays, done radio commercials. I love all of the arts, collected paintings, nourished people. Whatever the desires have been, I have tried and been lucky enough to know how to fill those. And actually, it's not me. I tell you, there has been a path drawn out for me. And all of a sudden, when I take this journey, I end up there. I'm not sure how it happens, but maybe I'm just one of the lucky ones.
Wow. I like that a lot.
I've been very fortunate. Yeah, I've been blessed.
Please read another poem. Read another poem.
Well, this is one that's sort of in process, really. It's a little bit longer than I'd want, and I'm very excited to take a look at it, and I think it's on course and do some revising, but it's called A Renewal. And this is for the new generation of women. It's much different than the way I was raised and how I walk through the world in all of my jobs, even in my marriage. Every way I've been cultured, the new young women coming up are going to be doing something different. I'm very excited for them, and it's called A Renewal. Overdue, but now on the go. With a well-charted course, we're prepared to now sail. A tweak of the rudder is what we're about. Expanding horizons is the name of the game. With indifference a thing of the past. It's now and not later, and not at half-mast. And as proud as the ocean, we're steadfast. Purged of all anger and documented in vow, not to be denied any longer, and fully up to the task. All doors must be opened, make good of this chance, harnessed in fairness, enduring liberty to the last. Acquiescence and compliance is now firmly behind. No longer perfumed roses were long off the start, no longer just poses as in pop magazines, inert and just limpid with a dumb-looking stare, but rather more purposed and at the crossroads, advocating more change and repair. Fortified with good reason and with no less a keen ear, and add to the mix is a determined new dare. In step with the certainty our strength fills the air, but still to be attained in the accordance of the just through and throughout our women's affairs. With agreeable balance in a system that's fair, as yet we do strive to dissuade the naysayers. Still buoyed and afloat with a simplistic desire, the life of the old status quo is now understood, and the reason why is that we women insist we need more than a bow. So, it's a little rough. I know it is. It was one of my first poems. But all the ideas are there, and it's really, I wanted to read it just because it's a salute to what's coming for women. And, we've been through this before. Women have been through this before where we get out and we protest and on and on. But I've been lucky enough to see a lot of changes.
Well, what do you think is the role of a poet in modern-day society?
Well, I immediately it came up for me. I think freedom, that women can represent all the different ways that women can be.
All right.
Number one, and that's so important, that they can fulfill their dreams, that they can make a life in whatever way that they choose, without a ton of stipulations as to how they should be, what is going to be acceptable. So as a poet, I see women writing these kinds of poems, just jumping out there with these gutsy phrases, in your face.
Yes.
This is me, and this is how I'm going to be. And I no longer have to apologize.
So freedom is extremely important.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back.
You bet.
We are back. Again, I am Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with Gerry LaGuardia Leonard. Gerry, all poets, all poets have several words that come up over and over and over again in their work. What are three of your absolute favorite words to use in your poetry?
Well, I like words that are almost immediately bring up an image. And behind that image oftentimes would be a picture. You get an image right away.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd rather write about hope, for example, without using the word hope. I haven't written a love poem, but I don't know why the love poems don't come.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't use love in my poems.
All right.
I don't really have a favorite. I don't have favorite words.
Okay.
That have been used over and over again, I would say. I hope I can, that the poetry comes across, leaving them with some sort of a feeling or emotion, something that maybe makes them feel a little better.
Well, that was actually my next question.
Or ponder.
Yes, that was my next question. What do you hope that people get when they encounter your work? And I think you answered that.
Yeah, I think of just, I think the feeling that, oh, yes, I have felt that myself. Oh, yes, that's me. I'd like to just,
form.
Okay, I have a couple of, just two short, of course they're short, haikus, if you don't mind.
No, please.
Haiku. Wings flutter with grace beneath moon's amber spotlight, butterfly ballet. So I had read an article. I love the environment, gardening, that sort of thing. And I had read an article about these butterflies that monarchs that they sighted migrating at night, and people weren't aware of it. I thought it was pretty fascinating to even think about it. The second one, haiku. Her dreams flew on clouds. Enraptured by the vision, she became a bird. And that's really, I think, more of a tanka, because it does have this person in it. And I do have another poem I'd like to read called The Hunt.
Please.
And this was from gardening in my yard. And we got a lot of deer that would come in. And, of course, they weren't the best friends for me because they would eat all of my blossoms and eat my plants just to the bare ground. So I chased a couple out of the yard, and my granddaughter, who loves animals, said, well, you know, Grandma, they have to eat too. So nothing like from the babe's mouth. Anyway, this is called The Hunt. Grazing in the pine-scented clearing, the 10-point stag is startled by invading whispers of crackling leaves, whiffs of human sweat and sulfur, prompting his snorts and stomps to alert the lazing herd, who skillfully bolt, stretching sinewy brown tendons over lichen rock, traversing forest corridors, taking refuge in their musky lair, outwitting the hunter's trappings of modern tech gear and stealthy tree stands, coveting the prized antlers as a boastful trophy in support of the illusory myth that man's dominant instincts reign, validated by his grip and click of the rifle, now traditionally referred to as sport. So I tried to make friends with the deer as much as I could, but and there are people who are against killing deer, but yet the hunt goes on.
Yes, it does. It does. Share one more.
Okay. This one is called War Games. Okay. Infused with patriotism, he enthusiastically enlisted, exuberant in faith and vivid recollections of his boyhood, heroically toting a toy rifle detailed in a backyard battlefield, playing with hubris bravado a game that could never prepare him for the stark brutality of this war, while chilling fear marches along every step, and the overwhelming sounds of war and death alternate with visions of his loved ones. The useless toil of suffering and the loss of too many lives, exacting fresh perspectives as to the relevance and morality about the horrific game of war. So often our young boys who played, guys, naturally they seem to, if you put a doll out and you put a gun out, would you say it was inborn or innate for them to reach for that gun and know how to play with it?
Yes,
and want to play? So they would play war, but they really are not prepared for the horrific game of war. And
wow.
I call it a game because you have, there are reasons for war, but I don't know if there really are any really good reasons for war. We haven't figured out how to live peacefully in this world.
That's so true. I agree.
Yeah.
Poets write for a myriad of reasons. Some write primarily to speak a message to their audience. Others write because to stay silent is not an option. Why do you write, Gerry?
Well, I think silence is not an option. And I had for many years said, as many people do, I should write a book. And finally I stopped and said, I'm a writer in one way or another. And I dream poetry, full poems. And I wake up and I can't recall them, unfortunately. Not all of them, but the idea is there.
Did you state that you dream full poems?
Full poems I will have in my dreams and then wake up. And I always, a poem always comes to me when I get in bed and I'm trying to get to sleep. Always, every single night. I write every night. And sometimes it's a couple of poems. But in the morning, they seem to, you get up and you make coffee and start your day, and someone calls for lunch or whatever. And one of the issues that I have around poetry is that I'm a social person, and so if I'm called to go with friends and meet for lunch or meet with my brother, sister, whatever, naturally I'd rather do that than stay home and be alone. I can spend hours and hours alone. I'm fine with that, but the social life has exceeded the poetry writing.
I can understand.
To some degree. I have to say that. But, I forgive myself for that. I truly do.
Which is an important thing to do, to be able to forgive yourself. I agree. You need to be able to do that, to be able to move forward in your life. You've got to forgive yourself.
Absolutely.
You've got to. We've got time for one more poem, Gerry. We've got time for one more poem.
Good.
Go.
Good, because as I said, I have concern about the environment and what's going on in all aspects of our universe.
Yes.
This is called Illusional Spectators. The binocular gawkers, excuse me, the light's getting very poor in here. Let me turn on my light. I'm so sorry. And this while I'm at it, I want to say it's about the wells. The binocular gawkers sway in boats, scrutinizing nimble ripples, anticipating nature's serendipity, fast to spot white geyser spurts from the gigantic slick head before he splits open the blue ocean door, heaving his still weight against gravity to preen inexplicable acrobats, slamming a tsunami finale. Each wave ascribed begging for restoration before becoming another sinking ship downward into the state of limbo, void of legendary sea deities, downward mingling with the debris, void of man's regrets or remedies, to wonder if his woeful songs will ever reach the oblivious conscience of the pleasure seekers ashore. So we know that our ocean bottom is a mess.
Yes, it is.
And we've been dumping in it for many, many years, and we need to pay attention and do something.
I agree.
And we are. In all defense, we are, but we still have muddied the waters and dirtied our universe.
Yes. I agree.
And
100%.
I guess it's just all for convenience and profit.
Yes. My final question to you tonight, and I really don't want this program to end. I'm enjoying you so much. What's next for you creative?
And what is your question? I'm sorry.
What's next for you creatively? Where do you go from here?
Well, I'm not sure. I'd like to do a book. I have not done a book because I didn't have enough poems. Mm-hmm. So I need to get clipping. And I don't know. You know, I've taken pottery. I taught myself how to sew, and I've had a ribbon studio.
What is a ribbon studio?
Ribbon flowers. Pardon?
What is a ribbon studio? I've never heard of that.
Well, I taught how to make ribbon flowers. It became very popular, and ribbon purses and ribbon pillows and ribbon cloths, and I don't do ordinary things.
Yes.
So I've been able to do so much. I would have done glass blowing, but I was a little afraid of being burned. So, after being burned in life a few ways here and there, I didn't need the real fire to do it too.
Well, I think as we close that you are an extraordinary person. An extraordinary person, and that your poetry is so beautiful, so real.
It was very nice of you to say that. Truly, I'm so appreciative, and it's been a thrill to be on your program. Truly.
Thank you. It's been a thrill for me too.
I mean that, but I'm a handful. I know that
I can tell. I can tell.
On that note, I hope every woman is a handful and doesn't apologize for it.
No,
life,
never apologize.
Get all the vigor out of it you can without hurting someone else. That's kind of a good motto.
Well, I want to say to everyone who's listening, this has been a pleasurable evening, and I want everyone out to take care and be safe. Be safe. Good night, everyone.
You bet.
Good night, Gerry.
Good night, and thank you again, Michael.
Oh, yes,
Bye-bye.
no problem.
You have just listened to the Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio Podcast with your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And make sure to catch our next episode.